Grab a tankard of grog and sit by the fire. Take a seat and get comfortable. This is no tall tale, no childhood story, no sailor's shanty. The story is as real as you or me. This is the tale of Captain Kwayza, a man who had nothing and lost everything. I met Frank when I was just a street urchin of 14, begging for scraps and the odd gold piece at ports. He was just a kitten, barely a week old when I found him. He was the runt of the litter and could easily fit in the palm of my hand. We would spend all day looking for scraps to eat, and all night looking for somewhere to sleep. Some days we would be spared scavenging due to a few gold pieces being tossed our way by the pompous rich men, the men who strutted across the pontoons like their farts smelled like roses. If we were really lucky, a raggedy man or woman spared a handful of coins. They looked almost as raggedy as us, but had an air of friendliness about them, even the scariest looking ones. These privateers came in all shapes and sizes, tall and skinny like a beanpole, or short and stout like a banana barrel, but always more pleasant than the men and the women of the Grand Maritime Union. Not to mention a coin or two in the handful of coins were different. They had a strange hexagonal shape to them, with a blue inner lining and a simple skull. No merchant or trader would take the coins, so we would save them, one at a time, almost like Lucky Charms. It was shortly after my 18th birthday when I received my 100th strange coin. I decided to celebrate and buy myself my first grog at the local tavern with the small amount of gold that I had received with the ancient coin. I grabbed a tankard and drank from it heartily, even letting Frank have a few sips of the frothy booze. As I sat in the tavern, one of the raggedy men started eyeballing me. This one, however, was different. There was a smug aura about him, but was shiftier than any other man I had ever seen. His eyes darted around the room like a snake, looking for a juicy mouse to swallow whole. Every so often, I'd catch him staring at the pouch on my hip, that jingled with every movement, the pouch full of the peculiar coins. I cannot remember if it was his strange aura or the grog going to my head, but I picked up Frank and waddled over, a bit heavy-footed from the grog. I sat down opposite him and looked him straight in the eyes. He was dressed in a strange pale green jacket that ran all the way down past his knees. He continued to eyeball me and glancing at Frank, who was sat on the table next to me, studying the man's features. This is when I spotted it, glinting in the firelight. A small speck of gold, like a thimble, sat on his left index finger and his thumb. The eyelid of his left eye had a much smaller drop, roughly the size of a teardrop. "What's your story?" I asked him. "And what is that gold substance on you?" "A sickness, a foul ichor that is foreign to this land, but nothing out of the ordinary for me," he replied. I looked at him, thinking he's just like all the rest of his tall tales and sailors' stories, but he was different. He was still a young man, but his eyes told a story far older than himself. You know, cats were worshipped by ancient people. They thought they had magical properties. They worshipped cats and it brought them jewels and gold. More than you and I could count, he said, staring at Frank intensely. He's been my lucky charm ever since I met him. I was homeless for a long time, and since I've had him, strangers seem kinder to me. People like you, anyway. Not those men in the powdered wigs, I replied. Is that how you amassed so many of those ancient coins? He glanced at my coin pouch. I grabbed it, worried he was about to rob me. I knew some of these men were pirates, but they were often hard to distinguish from privateers. Don't worry, I'm not going to rob you. There are plenty of them in my organisation's possession in the Sea of Thieves, he chuckled. The Sea of Thieves? Like the sailor stories? I chortled. The Sea of Thieves was a tale I had heard since I was small. My mother, before she passed, used to tell me stories, where father had disappeared to when I was not even old enough to walk. As I had grown up, I had realised he left her and was too selfish to care about me. The very same, where riches, adventures and glory awaits any man or woman strong enough to make it there. I may even have a map that could get you there, and a small ship that could brave the lethal Devil's Shroud, he grinned, a friendly grin with a sinister air. Come on, you're having me on, I sniggered. Part of me wanted to believe him. I could finally get off this disgusting, rotting island. Frank and I could live a life of luxury with no one to hold us back. We'd never have to beg again, and could live out our lives as pirates, forever. The man looked at me, sternly, and I gazed back. You don't believe me? He started unbuttoning his jacket, down to the third or fourth button, looked around at the empty bar with only the barmaid spit polishing a tankard in sight. He opened the top of his jacket, revealing his neck and chest was covered in more of the gold substance. More this time, with more gold than flesh visible. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was actually gold, solid gold, as real as the last few coins in my pocket. That's actually gold, I whispered. The stories may be true. I thought, Don't. He cut me off. I can give you the map and the ship if you'd like. I have no need of it. And what do you want in exchange? I asked. The cat, he uttered, looking me in the eye as he buttoned up his jacket. He's not for sale. He's the only friend I have, I exclaimed. He's all I have. He's not all you have. His eyes darted to the coins. You give me those ancient coins and you can have the ship and the map. These worthless things? I unhooked the pouch and placed it on the table, coins spilling out of the bag. You have yourself a deal. He nodded, taking the pouch and placing it in his jacket pocket. He then produced a coffee brown map labelled the Sea of Thieves. It seemed to be north of Mosquito Island, surrounded by a mist marked on the map. There were directions to approach from the northwest corner, and strict navigation rules to get through the mist. From this other pocket, he produced a small deed, signed with a signature that was illegible. It may have said Randboat, but I could not be certain. The deed was to a small sloop, docked in the bay at the very last jetty. Give this to the shipwright. The ship is yours. You should have no issue piloting the vessel. It is designed to be crewed by one man. He stood up, making a metal clanking as his feet must have been afflicted with the gold curse. Thank you, I said, still in disbelief at what had happened. He gave me a golden smile as he walked around the table and out the door. I wasted no time, swigged the rest of my grog, stuffed the map in my back pocket and picked up Frank. Our ticket out of this life was here, and a new life of adventure awaited us. We had made it through the shroud by the skin of our teeth. The Devil's Shroud had destroyed the little sloop, and a battered ship remained. The trusty little ship had given just as we sailed into a small cove, by the name of Smuggler's Bay. The mast had finally crumbled, and I had just managed to keep the vessel afloat. It lay dormant near the shore of the bay, nearly full of water and inhabitable for Frank and I. We'd run out of food the night before, so our best bet was to try and find food and shelter on the island. I managed to start a fire, where we had a good view of the bay and the lifeless husk of the ship. It would take a long time to repair it, but our welfare was more important. At least we were finally here at the Sea of Thieves, and we had each other. I used the fishing rod and some bait I had dug up from the beach to catch some fish. We would be fine here for a while, until I could get the wood to fix the ship. Or better yet, some friendly vessel would come and save us. The days turned to nights, and the nights into days. The days turned into weeks, and I finally managed to get the ship to a somewhat habitable condition. Then finally, I managed to raise the mast again. She would be sailing again soon. Our adventure was about to continue. Then they showed up. A larger ship than mine, with 3 large sails and 4 cannons, enough to destroy any small vessel, especially a defenceless one. The sails were emblazoned with a golden key and emerald green cloth that reminded me of something, but I could not recall it for the life of me. It's hard to remember over the sound of cannon fire and 4 sailors rushing towards you, shouting and screaming. The last I remember is blacking out and waking up on the beach, with the mast of the ship sticking out the waves in the calm bay. I looked around. Frank was gone. I was alone, and didn't even have a ship to my name. It struck me. I was by myself, with nary a vessel to get me home, and Frank was gone. I stood up. The sun was setting, and I needed to get a fire going. I returned to my camp, curling up in a ball, too cold to start a fire. I felt numb. I felt stupid. I had been tricked to coming to a dangerous land by myself with no experience of sailing. The dreams of becoming a pirate for the rest of my days seemed even more childish as I lay, stewing in my own grief. I was freezing and trying my best to go to sleep. After a few hours, I drifted into a slumber. A deep slumber, deeper than the greatest depths of the ocean. I dreamt a dream that I had never before. It was like I was awake, aware of all my actions, and that I was still asleep next to the fire pit. I stood up, looked around expecting to see Frank. I was still alone. I was no longer cold. It was as if a roaring fire was next to me. I felt a warmness inside of my chest that snuffed out the cold pang of loss. The bitter taste of grief was eclipsed by this brilliant warmth. I began to walk down the hill towards the bay and round to the bridge-like structure of rock that encircled Smuggler's Bay. I began to climb, feeling the urge to go higher. I felt like an eagle soaring above my sorrow, feeling the warmth of the sun, despite it being the dead of night. I reached to the top and stared southwards. I could see the endless expanse of the Sea of Thieves, a black abyss with no distinction between horizon or ocean. A faint ghostly green star shone where the horizon should be, and an even fainter orange glow above it. It seemed to be radiating heat, like a sun or a heavenly father embracing me. The heat began rising rapidly. My skin began to burn as if my blood was boiling. I was angry. Angry that I was tricked. Angry that I lost the only thing left dear to me. Angry that I could have been so foolish. I woke up in a sweat. Despite the morning air still being freezing cold, I felt like I'd slept in a furnace. I stood up, took a swig of my water from my tankard, and sat again. What was that dream? Was it a dream? It felt so real and so comforting. It was like someone was watching over me. It felt like I had hope. Then it clicked. Frank had been taken, and I knew I'd recognise the sails of the emerald green. It was the same colour as the man's gold jacket in the tavern. He sold me a map that would end up with me stranding myself on this island. He took the coins as a facade to put me at ease, and his friends could easily take Frank. He even said that cats were thought to bring them gold. That would also explain the gold skin. If the stories are true, then curses must be common in the Sea of Thieves. There was hope. I just needed a way off this island. I had two options: fashion a small dinghy or a raft and brave the open sea, or wait to be rescued. That seemed unlikely. If the goldmen were to be used as a watermark, it was best not to take that chance. I would have to harvest the wood with my dull sword and craft myself a dinghy. I would row to the nearest part of civilization, I would raise the money for another ship, or be a swabby for a better captain. But I had to get my friend back. I managed to find a spyglass, and can now see some sort of island in the distance. It seems to have houses or even a tavern on there. That would be my objective. Again, the days turned into weeks, and now the weeks turned into months. I had the same dream every night, each time feeling more real. It felt more comforting each time, like someone was watching over me. I had managed to find myself an old banjo in one of the caves tucked away behind a barrel. I had played as a little child, Mother had taught me. I was rustier than an old sailor's cutlass, but it filled my downtime. A melancholy melody filled my head, as faint as an old dream. I played and played until my fingers bled. My small rowboat was coming along nicely. I placed it in the bay. It would be a day or more of rowing. The sun was setting, so I decided I would start fresh tomorrow and hopefully reach the island by nightfall the next day. I sat by the bonfire, looking up at the arch that towered over the bay. I don't know if it was curiosity or optimism that got me up, walking down the hill in the hopes that I would climb it. I had only been there during the day and had never needed to go up there during the night. I climbed the archway from the western side as I had done in the dream. As I got higher, I could feel the warm embrace, just like my dream. I finally reached the peak and looked over at the spot where the two lights had been. Disappointingly, there was nothing but the blue-black abyss. The warm feeling was faint this time, not anywhere near the inferno I had experienced in my dream. Then, it appeared, the faint orange light, but it was growing larger and larger than it had done before. It began twisting and turning, brighter than the sun, until it formed a face. This was not a face of any man I had seen. It was skeletal, with a beard and a missing tooth. It wore a huge hat that would fit the grandest of sea captains. It was a translucent orange, ghostly orange. I should have ran in terror, but I felt embraced, just as I had before. It spoke.
My boy, you have finally taken the plunge. I have been watching you since you had arrived in this cursed land. You were betrayed by someone you thought your ally. You have lost everything, and they took something most dear to you. I cannot give you back what you have lost, but heed my voice. Trust no one but yourself. Retrieve what they stole. Follow your heart.
This should have frightened me to death, but the skeletal head did not seem like an antagonist. He neither felt like the wind in my sails or the anchor holding me down. Whatever it was right. I had to get Frank back. I had not and will not give up. We were going to be pirates forever. The glory was still in our grasp. I reached the island at sunset the next day. I sat in the rowboat, beached and exhausted. I had escaped that island through sheer will of finding my best friend. There was an array of tents and shops. I decided to ask at the tavern for any leads. I asked the barmaid about the gold men, to which she informed me they were a group known as the Gold Hoarders. They were a trading company that opens cursed chests for you in exchange for a small amount of gold. They seemed just as slimy as I'd imagined. I asked about Frank, but she said she had not seen a cat at this outpost for over a year. Luckily, she urged me to ask the gold hoarder at their tent tomorrow. I went to leave but was stopped by a man, not much older than me, at the door. He asked about me and I told him my story. It seemed as though he had an axe to grind with the gold hoarders and had a ship. He said I could help him out as he was surprised I made it through the shroud. The man informed me that there was an old route into the Sea of Thieves, that the shroud ebbed and flowed like the ocean, and new routes into the Sea of Thieves had to be found. The skull had said not to trust anyone. However, I had no choice and had to follow my heart. Morning came and we spoke to the gold hoarder. He was unwilling to divulge information at first, until he saw my cutlass. He let on that the crew had stopped here a few months ago and were looking for an artifact to break the Devil's Shroud. He said they were emissaries of the gold hoarders and acted like mercenaries. He pointed us south and said it would be hard to catch up to them, considering we were many months behind. We sailed south from island to island, outpost to outpost, looking for any leads. We battled ancient skeletons, giant leviathans, and bigger, more experienced crews, all of which fell to our sword or our cannons. We were lucky enough to amass large amounts of treasure through taking it from other crews or taking up missions for the various trading companies. The hole in my heart began to shrink. I no longer was alone. I had forged a crew of my own, others with similar motives to me, looking for loved ones, revenge, or glory. As the days went by, the crew became my family, my friends. The days turned to months, and the months turned to years. As time passed, my loss became sorrow, which turned to anger, which turned to wrath. I had become just what I wanted, a feared captain, a pirate that's name was known across the Sea of Thieves, but I had lost myself. I still had not gotten Frank back, and I was only a little closer to finding out where the emissaries were. That was until I encountered the mysterious stranger. The mysterious stranger was an envoy of the pirate lord, the man who discovered, or should I say, rediscovered the Sea of Thieves. He talked of an island obscured by the shroud, a land filled with curses and gold. The man informed us of a way to get there, a way which hadn't been done since a brave crew ventured there around a year ago. But there were rumours of a new crew, with ties to the gold hoarders, who had ventured there a few days ago. We learned of the shroud breaker, which they used to part the shroud to sail there. We had no way of getting there as the crew had amassed the parts needed for it. I went to bed aboard the burning Leviathan that night with the fire in my heart turning to ash. There was no way I was going to get my friend back. For 4 long years I had searched only to end in failure. The crew felt as I did. We all had different motivations for finding the emissaries. It was that night. I had the dream again. The old dream I had not had since I was back at Smuggler's Bay. It was like I was back there, again, looking out into the blackness, staring into the eyes of the skeletal head, appearing in the distance. He was slightly more eastwards now, and much further away. His warmth filled my chest again, just as it done before. Again, he looked at me and spoke.
You think your quest has fallen short. I've been watching you, and you have done what I have said. You live for yourself and never let anyone get in the way of your goal. You have amassed a loyal crew and command respect across the seas. Go to the Reaper's hideout. You will receive what you need to see your quest through.
And just as before, the head faded away like the sun setting. I woke up. This time I was not swimming in my own sweat, but the morning breeze blew through the crack in the door. The crew was already tending to their duties. I stood up, opened the door, and told the crew to plot a course for the Reaper's hideout. It was over a day's sailing from Ancient Spire outpost. We had made good time, the wind mysteriously always at our backs, guiding us northwest. For once, all feeling had subsided. Maybe this was it. I would finally become whole again. We arrived at the grim-looking improvised hideout, shrouded in a pungent green fog that clung to you like a drunkard's breath. We docked on the east side of the island, and made our way to the hall. It seemed to be made of an old ship. Inside, a warm orange glow lit up, an array of gold masks and a singular masked man. We entered, one by one.
I have 2 gifts for you. Should you accept them, you will be initiated into the Reapers. We live for ourselves, give nothing back, and take what we want. This is the way the Sea of Thieves should have always been. Reject the other trading companies, and live for the glory of battle.
I looked at the crew, and they gazed back. I knew what I had to do. The anger in my chest burned like never before. We took a mask and a set of robes, and placed them over us. The masked man gave us one more thing. It was a gift from a friend, to be loaned until my quest is done. We were each to hold the small, fiery glass ball. This was said to be an old artifact, and to look through it would part the shroud. I thanked him as the crew returned to the ship. As I returned to the ship, I felt powerful. A power that I had not known before. A power that burned within me. My anger, my loss, my wrath, my sorrow, all melted into one. I finally had realised I had become powerful, a new strength I could never have achieved if I had never come to the Sea of Thieves. I was so close to the end of my quest, I could taste it. We reached the shores of gold around a week later. Finally, as the ship parted the shroud, I saw it, the vessel that had robbed me of everything all those years ago. It sat dormant in a bay near a giant peak near the centre of the island. As we sailed around, we saw that south of the ship was a giant avenue of statues, far larger than anything I'd ever seen. We docked up next to the ship. There was no sign of life. 2 of us walked aboard to find one of the crew members, dressed in green, asleep in the captain's quarters. I prodded him with my sword, and he yelped as he woke up. He screamed, confused as to how this happened. "Where is the cat? Where have you taken him? Do you know how long I've searched for him?" I screamed. The man, confused, looked at me, eyes agape and frightful. "Who are you?" he pleaded. I removed my mask, showing him my face. He screamed in horror. "You're here to perform the ritual," he gasped. "They took him to the chamber, underground, under the statue." I glanced at the crew again. "To the ferryman," I said, "and the ship to Davy Jones' locker." We drew our swords and ended him. We climbed aboard our vessel, angled our cannons, and fired. A flurry of splintering wood and metal erupted from the ship. We made our way to the statue, looking for the entrance. We made our way through the series of traps, caverns, and waves of skeletons. Along the way, we found 2 of the other crew members. One had succumbed to the skeletons, and the other fallen down a pit filled with sharpened wooden stakes. Then, we found it. The giant throne room fit for a king. The final crewman was nowhere to be seen. There were piles of treasure about everywhere, stacked higher than mountains. I could see something small sat in the chair. I ran towards it. There are stories of the crew that defeated the Gold Hoarder, how they travelled here, destroyed the Skeleton Lord, and made it out with a shipload of gold and glory. There was even talk of how the Pirate Lord himself manifested in a ghostly green spectre to congratulate them for their efforts. No such thing occurred for us. No audience with him, no rousing speech about how it was about the glory and not the gold. No invitation to go to his legendary hideout, where you could share your tales for all eternity. It seems that we're not fit for his idea of legend. There was one thing left for us to do, a task given to us by the Servant of the Flame. The last thing to cement our legacy. As we return to our ship, not as pirate legends, but a crew that has been forged in the fires of battle, in the fury of revenge, and the wrath of the scorned. We return our gifts to the Reapers to find out we have been given a final gift. This one we can keep. People come to the Sea of Thieves for many reasons. Maybe for glory, maybe for love, maybe for gold, maybe for eternal life. We may not be spending eternity in a tavern, drinking grog, or sharing tales of our exploits. We will continue to live for glory, through the thrill of battle, and to serve no one but ourselves. He is neither an anchor to hold us back, or a sail to take us there, but a guiding spectral light that shows us the way.
To be a pirate, forever, that is our gift.